Hello and welcome to the next edition of Architizer Live. Thank you for joining us. I'm Paul Keskes, Editor-in-Chief at Architizer. I'm thrilled to welcome back Roderick Bates, Director of Corporate Development at Chaos, to our virtual stage. Today, Roderick will reveal key findings from a major industry survey of more than 2,000 design professionals that will give us insights into the state of architectural visualization today and where it may be heading tomorrow, from real-time rendering to artificial intelligence. The survey findings have also been summarized in a key white paper produced by Architizer and Chaos, and we'll share a link to this so you can explore the details in your own time after the event. Now, while we wait for the room to fill up, feel free to say hi in the chat. It's always amazing to see everyone tuning in from all around the globe. Now, a few quick housekeeping items for our new viewers. If you're having any technical difficulties with the stream, you can click on the help icon in the bottom left corner and you'll see a few options for improving your picture, the sound, and so on. It's worth noting that there'll also be a recording of this webinar, so you can catch up on anything you missed after the event. If you have a question you'd like to ask Roderick, click on the questions tab on the bottom right of your screen and type your question there. If you see a question from someone else you'd be interested in hearing, you can upvote it and I'll ask the most popular questions a little bit later on. And finally, don't forget to hit those react buttons in response to anything you find compelling today. Now I'm delighted to introduce Roderick Bates. Roderick is the Director of Corporate Development at Chaos. Throughout his career, Roderick sought out and developed solutions to environmental challenges related to the design, construction, and operations of buildings. We've done a couple of webinars before, and they were absolute gold in terms of knowledge sharing, so I'm super excited for this one. Now, without further ado, I'll hand over the virtual mic to you, Roderick. Take it away.
Thank you very much. And let me share my screen here. And Paul, if you'd let me know if everything looks the way it should.
That looks perfect.
All right, excellent. First of all, thank you very much for having us back here. When there was an opportunity to present this webinar, I leaped at it. It's not very often where you get to share what people are thinking from our industry on this scale. I talk to a lot of customers, but I never talked to 2,000 customers, or actually, I think it was 2,139. So this is really an exciting opportunity for me. And from the data that we were able to collect, we're going to be sharing a lot of insights back to all of you, because I'm sure none of you are able to talk to 2,000 or so of your competitors or maybe your peers. This is an opportunity to get that information. So why did we go out and partner with Architizer to collect this information, and who is the we? The we is Chaos, and Chaos creates the technology that is used across a variety of industries, obviously architecture, artists, designers, people are making the movies you love, to really visualize ultimately anything that they can imagine, anything if they're able to model and design, we can visualize it. So what does that mean from the perspective of software? And a lot of people really know our software, but they don't know us as part of this much larger corporate umbrella of Chaos. Well, the first thing is that we have multiple different types of software. One of them being things that really fall under sort of our V-Ray suite. And this is about photorealistic rendering. These are the types of things that make movies, make a lot of commercials you see where you think, oh, how do they get this incredible shot? Well, it's probably our software. And then we have real-time rendering capabilities with our Enscape software. It plugs directly into a variety of the design platforms used within architecture, engineering, and construction. And as you design, you can get these types of visualizations right out of that, really allowing for you to understand what your building is going to look like when it's complete. And then we have Solindo. It's a newly acquired company, part of our overall umbrella. And Solindo does furniture assets primarily. And these are used for, as you can imagine, a variety of industries. E-commerce, how do you have something look before you buy it? But of course, also bringing those types of assets into our software. So when you're designing something, you can actually have the type of furniture that you're envisioning will be there once the project is complete. So that gives you a sense of who we are and why we would be asking this question. We care deeply, obviously, about what the design profession is doing today and tomorrow. So I'm putting this out here right at the beginning, access to the white paper Something my mother always did when I was little was say, eat your dessert first, and then it'll calm you down and you can enjoy the rest of the meal. So hopefully I won't be losing some of the audience by giving you the access to the full report right now. But it really is fantastic, this overall report. And I have to say, partnering with Architizer on this is always a pleasure. And being able to have such a high response rate was really fantastic. So let's dive into the report or the survey itself and give you a sense of the types of information we collected, who responded, and see how relevant it might be to you as an industry. The first thing is the number of people within the firm itself that responded. It was interesting for us is actually we had an incredible amount of diversity. We had very large firms, but we also had very small firms, people that are working independently, freelancers. And I think having that type of very large perspective is incredibly important because the needs of a very small firm will oftentimes overlap with a large firm. Of course, they're not going to be the same. So having that perspective is particularly important. And you'll see throughout the data, actually, there's a lot of information that does pertain to both, but it's still good to see the diversity of responses. As far as the firm location, there was certainly a North America bias, but at least in my experience, a lot of trends do start here in North America. It's one in which oftentimes there's some of the more rigorous contract requirements, and then they typically cascade outwards. So while that's certainly something to say, maybe the data is a little skewed in that sense, oftentimes we don't see a huge difference in methodologies and practices, but at least between North America and Europe, although we do see some unique practices in Asia and Oceania. As far as firm specialization, this is something that really had me excited, is that we really have all the major stakeholders represented in the building design process. We have architecture, interior design, obviously being very key, engineering, incredibly important, master planning, landscape architecture. So we have all the various parties that work together. So hearing how all of them think of visualization, I see as being incredibly important because ideally, visualization is an important design communication tool, not just between, say, a project and the stakeholder or the client group, but also between the various parties that are involved in the actual design itself. So what is our agenda today? Well, the first thing is we want to start at the beginning, as always, which is how do people use real-time visualization or real-time rendering to win work? Is it part of their workflow to win work? And then how are they using it to expedite the design process itself? What was interesting from this survey too is that it's not all roses. There's a lot of challenges that people are finding when it comes to real-time visualization workflows. And what are some of the problems that they have? Are they hardware-based? Are they knowledge-based? What have you? And so we have some great data with respect to that. Something that I thought would be of a lot of interest to the people on this call was, well, what are your competitors planning for the future? It's very difficult to know what you should be doing as a practice to stay competitive, say maybe 2 years from now. And oftentimes what you need to do to be competitive 2 years from now, you need to start now. So I thought this would be some really interesting information for people joining us. And then the last thing, of course, is AI. It wouldn't be a webinar in 2023 without mentioning AI. And we certainly wouldn't be one of the world's leading visualization firms if we didn't mention AI as well. So this is obviously a topic of great interest to us. And we had some very interesting data that I think perhaps undermines some of the stereotypes that people might have about the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. So let's start at the beginning there, winning work and expediting the design process. So one of the first things we found is that when it comes to winning work, we were actually somewhat surprised that this figure was where it was, but 45% of respondents said they use visualization when pitching projects. We actually thought it would be higher. It's a great way to communicate. But one of the things that we did think was quite interesting, though, is for firms that are using visualization to pitch projects, the overwhelming majority of them are producing those images in-house. And I think of those of us at a certain age within this industry, remember when everything had to be farmed out, and it was quite a process to create visualization. So seeing that move in-house and actually seeing the profession start to maybe sort of bring back some expertise and skill where a lot of it has been pushed out is quite exciting. And with that 75%, we actually have an interesting split between in-house visualization experts, dedicated teams, which probably reflective of some of the larger firms that responded, but a very large number actually have the designers themselves doing the visualizations. And I think this speaks to how easy it can be, and how fast it can be, and how cost efficient it can be to use visualization nowadays. So some of the examples that we've seen, at least from speaking to customers and then cross-referencing that with the responses to the survey, is that people are finding that clients are more and more asking for almost a component of the design process to occur during the interview process itself. And unfortunately, because it's part of that interview process, it doesn't necessarily have the financial compensation associated with it. So people are finding that if they use real-time visualization, that threshold, that barrier of entry when it comes to cost and time and effort that goes into it, and of course expertise as well, is low enough that they can use this type of visualization where they're actually going through a portion of a design process with a client, and actually make that something where they're not losing money necessarily prior to actually getting the project itself. So one of the things that we see is the real time for basically in-interview design exploration. I remember an interview years ago where we had a pile of chipboard and we're cutting things and making designs while talking to the client or the potential client in real time, and thinking, boy, how much easier it would have been instead of trying to make a model in real time. You could actually do it via visualization. The other thing is that every time you have a translation step between various softwares, you're going to have a slowdown in a visualization process or any type of modeling process. And oftentimes people are using one type of modeling software that's very easy to use, maybe it's SketchUp or Rhino or something like that, during these interview stages. So having a visualization software that really works across multiple platforms is key. And that's one thing that we, particularly with our Enscape software, take very seriously. And then the last thing, of course, is that you need to have something that's easy to use and creates really strong visuals, but without necessarily a very rigorous workflow. And you can see some examples that have been done down below where create very quick visuals that can communicate to clients in real time without having to go through a laborious process. Well, let's say you win the work. Congratulations. And of course, now you have to get down to business. And one of the things we found from the responses was that when it came to visualization, there was a real decrease on every stage. So concept design, it probably makes sense that you're doing a lot of exploration, so you need visuals to go along with that exploration. But what was interesting for us is to see this decrease down through construction documents. But there was at the same time a fairly healthy percentage of people that are using visualization during that later stage. And because it was somewhat unusual, it's only 18 or so percent, we wanted to provide some examples. So we'll show you some examples a little bit later in this presentation of how people are using it quite late in design for the purpose of visual communication in ways that we think are quite novel and honestly have real applicability to a degree that probably outstrips that relatively modest percentage, the 18% using in construction documents. So let's start with some of the main benefits that people saw during the design process itself. And ultimately, if you look at the benefits that people saw, it really came down to a couple of things. Well, maybe two things. It saved time and improved communication. And in a service-based industry like architecture, engineering, and construction, saving time is huge. And communicating more effectively, of course, saves time as well. You show someone one piece of information, they're able to interpret it, act upon it, make a decision, move forward, as opposed to requiring additional information, multiple iterative review cycles. So the idea of saving time and improving communication, the two really come together in a lot of ways. So we're going to go into these percentages you see on the right of the screen and provide a little bit more characterization there. So the number one reason why people were using visualization, particularly real-time visualization during the design process, was for reviewing material options. So if you look at an example like this, or maybe you have a stucco versus brick, it's pretty challenging necessarily to see which one you want. But when you have visualizations, you can say, okay, I really like the brick. The stucco just isn't doing it for me. And so that's, interestingly enough, the number one application that people have for real-time visualization. Just slightly less used real-time visualization to create these types of 3D immersive walkthroughs with for project stakeholders. And what they found was so effective about these with real-time renderings, A, they're incredibly easy to generate, but two, they gave the client group and the various stakeholders a very intuitive sense of the space. By showing them something like this, you can create a very curated experience that allows them to understand the relative proportion of rooms, the flow of spaces, what the views might be outside of the windows, things like that. An enormous amount of information actually all compressed down into one very efficient model walkthrough. Another interesting application was one that isn't, or at least wasn't, traditionally part of what people might have conceived of as the visualization workflow. But it's really about the idea that people can view or use a visualization, one that brings in all the atmospheric conditions like clouds and sun and things like that, and reflects its particular location of this project within the world, and be able to understand what it looks like during different times of day, whether it be nighttime, daytime, what have you. And this is something that I think is a really powerful tool, because how people experience a space and how the light moves through a space is very important part of how people really fall in love with the design. And communicating that through real-time visualization is a way of essentially using a visualization that might be used for other types of communication processes, like that different material options. For instance, that material option exploration can be used to create these types of visualizations, where you're looking at what a space might be like at different times of day. Will be certain areas, when will the pool, say, be in the shade? When will it be in full sun exposure? How does it look at night? And obviously, all of that really is about improving communication with clients. And this is something that we've heard a lot as a software, is that improving client communication is incredibly important. So the idea of maybe creating visuals that have a mini map that allow for clients to self-navigate through a space. They can hop on a location, go from one spot to another, really understand things intuitively. They might be able to write in notes. Additional information can be provided to share information with a broader audience. This is actually something we've heard a lot from our customers, and we have a beta product actually out right now. So if you see the QR code there, you could scan that and go to Chaos Cloud Collaboration. It's something that it's sort of growing. It's like they are taking off in the airplane as you build it, but it's something that we want to have a lot of people use, provide us feedback. But a part of it really comes down to this idea that 41% of people responding to this survey say that communicating with clients is incredibly important. And of course, part of that client communication is also this idea of design option comparison. So that's something else that you can see here. How does option A look versus option B? And how can you make it incredibly easy to see both? So that's the idea, where you can have something like that, where you can almost swipe one way or the other, see both options, and maybe have some lightweight commenting. People can say, draw on an image, maybe put in a few arrows, things like that. Because when it comes to improving communication, it has to be accessible, both from a visual perspective, but also from a sort of information sharing perspective, because obviously it's not just one-way communication. This type of client communication is really about two-way communication. So nearly on the same level of that type of collaboration with clients was exploration of designs with virtual reality. And this was really exciting for us to see, and honestly, fairly surprising for a couple of reasons. One is that VR is, at least to some degree, an equipment-intensive workflow. It's one that obviously requires a VR headset, and it requires a client that's comfortable putting on a VR headset. But seeing this high percentage reflects the value that we hear consistently from customers when it comes to VR, is that there's really very few other tools outside of, say, a full-scale mock-up or something like that, that can communicate a sense of space. How big is a volume? How does it feel to go from one room to the next? Things like that. And there's just really nothing else quite like virtual reality. So seeing this high percentage to us was incredibly exciting, and reflects something that I've started to hear from customers. And there's one of our customers, maybe they're on this call, but I've started to use their phrase where they said the era of shareable wearables is coming to an end. And I think that's something that we're hearing more and more, is that clients actually have VR headsets. Maybe it's something that they bought for their kids. They happen to have access to it. Maybe a company is using it as part of their experimenting and as part of their meeting workflows, what have you. But there is an expectation now on the part of various stakeholders, both within the design team and perhaps outside of the design team, to be able to have VR experiences. And so seeing this really high percentage is starting to reinforce that. And so when we think about what's next on the horizon, or what does it take to really be a competitive firm, seeing this 40% figure for VR makes us think that VR is really a key part of the design process at this point for a lot of firms. So that's the real time, or that's the way in which real time is used to expedite the design process. And it all sounds great, but honestly, there's a lot of challenges that people revealed through the course of the survey. And I think it's pretty interesting to talk through those challenges and then share with you ways that we feel we've provided some solutions. I think something that may be worthwhile is to have people comment in the chat in ways in which perhaps the solutions we're proffering maybe don't align with your needs. Because I feel in many ways solving challenges is probably the best way that you can make a good product. So hearing this, at least for me, was incredibly important as it has direct implications for our customers. And obviously, it's a great opportunity for me through this webinar to hear if this resonates with your experience. So there were some big challenges when it came to actual implementation, but it was across a variety of categories. It wasn't like it was with expediting design, where it really came down to saving time and improving communication. There's actually a variety of different reasons where people are finding it difficult to implement real-time visualization technology. So the number one thing that people found was that it was very difficult to integrate the real-time technology with the software that they used for modeling. And obviously, I don't know what software people are referring to when it came down to the type of real-time visualization they were referring to. But I do know that our Enscape software integrates directly into most of the software that's being used to design buildings. Obviously, there's some that aren't necessarily reflected here. I would love to hear from those in the audience if there's a platform here that you regularly use that's not supported by Enscape. But really, these are the big ones. And so from our perspective, this is something where maybe this is a challenge for other software, or maybe it's a perceived challenge, or maybe there's something about our software that we don't necessarily know. But this was quite interesting to us to hear that basically half of people said that the biggest challenge they had was actually integrating the real-time software with the design software they're using on their particular project. So from our perspective, the easiest way to resolve this is to essentially directly integrate with the BIM or CAD platform you might be using. So this means that it's essentially completely live. It also means that the visualization software can't function outside of the context of one of these platforms. But what that does is it creates a really tight connection between the two. And it also reduces the amount of back and forth data transfer that may be required. So from our perspective, it's a really effective solution. And if you happen to fall into that 47.8%, we'd really recommend you give Enscape a try and see if it resolves this particular challenge. The other challenge that people had, which was really, I wouldn't say necessarily surprising, but I think is really reflective of the breadth of utilization of visualizations that people have in their particular design firms. So 42% or so said that real-time just didn't deliver the quality they needed. And this is absolutely the case, I think, for a lot of different reasons. When I introduced our company at the beginning, I referred to us as having a photoreal suite of software. Those were led by our flagship V-Ray software. And then we had real-time with Enscape. And obviously, I didn't say those two, that we had real-time photoreal, although we do have a software that falls into that category for more media and entertainment applications. But what's interesting here is that we recognize that there are two different softwares with two different visual outcomes and different workflows associated with them. So by bringing these multiple software under one corporate umbrella, we actually have a workflow that allows for a user to go from Enscape and the real-time visualization they're used in Enscape and actually push that data via proprietary file format that we have called VR Scene or V-Ray Scene they can push their geometry, material data, assets, things like that into V-Ray. It's a workflow that at this point is fairly well codified, but we're always working to improve it further. But if you happen to be a license holder for both Enscape and V-Ray, I highly recommend you take advantage of this. And essentially, you don't really have to do anything. If you've used V-Ray in a given model, you can just open that same model, or rather Enscape in a given model, just open it in V-Ray and the data transfers over. But we also have something called a VR scene file export, like I mentioned, that you can also push that data into a multitude of other platforms within our software ecosystem. But it really gets down to exactly this challenge, that real-time software fundamentally cannot produce the type of visual quality that people need all the time. So we need to create an alternative workflow to achieve that. So I'd really push people to consider this one and take advantage of the fact that we've integrated really two great softwares that have very different functions. The other thing that we recognize when it comes to that visual quality is it's not always just about making something look photoreal. Sometimes it's also about having the right assets and access to the assets in your visualization. So something that we've done as a company is we recently acquired Access Design, or AXYZ, who makes fantastic humans or people to populate your designs. And I think one of the biggest challenges when it comes to really high quality renderings, when it comes to client communication, at least on some projects, is that there is a challenge, particularly say in a real-time rendering software that has a limited number of, or maybe not limited, but a smaller number of people and assets that have to be optimized for real time, is that you don't necessarily have access to the full breadth of types of people that you want, or the entourage that you want to have in your project. And the reason why you want to have the right people in your project is that when you go in front of a stakeholder group and you have the wrong people, it can be really sort of a degree of dissonance. If you have a lot of people that maybe are all, say, populated from, say, an office environment, but it's supposed to be a hospital where maybe you need to have people in wheelchairs and things like that, it just doesn't compute. So having the right people, reflecting the right backgrounds, for those that will actually use the building, we feel is an incredibly important part of the overall quality picture when it comes to design communication. And clearly a lot of customers agree. So that's why we brought in Access, and that's something that we're really excited about. And you'll start to see that trickle into our software over time as we bring more and more of these very high quality assets across the full Chaos software ecosystem. In addition to those quality considerations, say that come down to that a pure visual quality and the quality of the assets and things like that, a very large chunk found that hardware itself, access to hardware, is inhibiting the use of real-time visualization. And I can certainly appreciate this. Not all computers have essentially a graphics card, which is necessary for real-time visualization. You're doing something very akin to, say, playing a video game. However, the environment of the video game is one that you've created via your modeling platform. So what you need to do is you need to have a system that meets the basic requirements. So when we saw this result, obviously, you want to check this result against your own software performance and say, well, should this be a hurdle or should it not? And we do know, particularly in large firms, people don't get a lot of leeway when it comes to purchasing decisions. They get the hardware they get. Or as they said to my kids, I think in preschool, you get what you get and you don't get upset. But we looked at the requirements and we found that for only a few $100s, you can get something that is compatible with Enscape for supporting real-time visualization. And basically the fundamental requirements, you need to have 4 gigabytes of RAM and a VRAM. And that's not a huge requirement this day and age. Maybe if you go back 8 years ago, that would be a bit more significant, but now you can get it fairly inexpensively for a few $100s. Obviously, the faster computer you have, the better it gets. I remember talking to one of our clients recently that actually had a dedicated 240 line going into a very powerful computer they're using for visualization at their office. So if you want to get a gaming computer that's water cooled and has great lights, go for it. But it's certainly not required. So I think one of these challenges here with the hardware limiting the use of real-time visualization, it is true, but that threshold's pretty low these days, given the power of various hardware that's out there. The other challenge, which I think is absolutely legitimate here is that there's a lack of knowledge to use various software. And obviously, getting knowledge takes time. And when you have design teams that are perhaps ebbing and flowing, people maybe are coming off of a long CA process, getting back into a new project at schematic design. They don't necessarily have time to learn all of these new visualization tools. And this is something that we at Enscape take quite seriously. And we have a philosophy around this. And it's a philosophy when I was talking to one of our UX UI designers, I asked them to put in sort of their philosophy into words. And they described it in a way that I thought made a lot of sense. They said, there's ways in which you can create a visualization that are akin to a self-driving car. You don't even have a steering wheel. Maybe you just tell it where you want to go, and the car takes care of the rest. You don't really get a choice of the route or any kind of nuance and things like that, or the speed even. It just goes. And there's some AI powered options out there that are starting to do that. You can see this little screen cap here from Evolve Labs Veris software, where you can have a BIM model and you can run a visualization. Essentially, just whatever you get is what you get. And it's actually quite powerful in a lot of ways, but you give up a lot of control. But if you want control, maybe on an extreme end, our designers saw something similar to like a 747 cockpit, an incredible array of buttons. You can do everything and anything, complete nuance control. And for the real expert, this is fantastic. They can really dive into all of the details of their visualization, adjust the light just so. You get steam to show, volumetric lighting, or sort of, God rays, as they call them, and things like that. Really just perfect visualizations throughout. They can really respond to the needs of the artist, if you will. The downside of that is that you need the same type of training that comes along with flying that airplane. You need a lot of training. And of course, you still need time and expertise and things like that. So that's something where we see that a place for that, but it's not necessarily where we feel Enscape is really at its sweet spot. And so we have a philosophy of Enscape being similar to your contemporary car. It has a lot of electronic systems, cruise control, maybe lane departure warnings, things like that. But at the same time, it's one in which you can produce very high quality visualization. So we can consider it kind of the middle ground, where you have quite a bit of nuance control, but not so much that it's overwhelming and has a steep learning curve, and not so little that you really can't manipulate the image outside of just trying a new prompt over and over again. So when we see this 27%, we think a lot of people should just give it a try. Try something like Enscape and see how it goes. It was always designed from the onset with ease of use in mind. And we think we've done a pretty darn good job of that, along with, of course, all the knowledge resources that we have available. But this does reflect something that we've heard before. And it's one of the reasons why, as we mature our software, add new capabilities, we always keep in mind that there's this continuum of incredibly easy to use, but maybe perhaps too simplistic, up to incredibly complex, true expert level software. And we really want to retain that sweet spot that we have in the middle. So if we take all of this, you can see how people are using it now, some of the challenges they've had. But one of the things I thought would be really interesting for people joining us is get a sense of how your competitors are using visualization. Because obviously you can't talk to 2,000 of your peers that you're going against when it comes down to the next project. But this is a good opportunity to hear what they're planning to do in the future and what maybe perhaps what you have to do at your firm to stay competitive. So the first thing that we saw was that a lot of people are planning on even expanding and investing in real-time technology in the next 12 months. The nature of that expansion is quite diverse. So we took some examples from this list here and wanted to tie it back to some things that we're seeing our customers do, some emerging technology that we're already starting to incubate as well, that gets into the future applications of real-time visualization that go beyond just creating these great images or some of these workflows that we're seeing already, such as the design option comparisons that was so popular during the actual design process. So the first things is that people really want to use visualizations to provide better ways for architects to communicate and work with clients. And one of the things that we found in talking with various people is that it's not just about communicating the traditional design data. They want to find ways to communicate other more complex data, maybe building performance data in ways that are really intuitive to clients, ways in which the render is the result, for example. And we're seeing this across a wide variety of perspectives, but I think that's absolutely makes sense is that real-time visualization as a tool for improving communication with clients and other stakeholders is really going to be growing. The other thing that we thought was really interesting is that 41% wanted to use real-time visualization to improve coordination during the construction phase. And this is something that we see as being incredibly exciting. And you're looking at a construction coordination mockup built by one of our customers, M. Moser. And they use this with their contractors to actually game out the construction scenario to figure out, okay, how do we actually build it? What's the sequencing for that construction? So it was very much so something that was done in tandem with the contractors to help them understand how to build this. So you consider what it can take if you wanted to build a physical mock-up for something like this. It's incredibly expensive. It's difficult to really take apart, see the nuanced pieces, see what it's supposed to look like when it's complete. But with a virtual mock-up like this, people can put on VR, they can interact with the various components, they get a real sense of scale without going through the incredible expense of building that physical mock-up. We're seeing similar activities on the part of some of our contractor customers, particularly when it comes to figuring out how they might be able to, say, fit equipment into a certain space to access something, and also just to show people in the field what are the various components of a given assembly, what's the exact nuance of a given detail. So this is something that we see as we personally think is going to grow significantly, and seeing this 41% saying, hey, people really want to use it to improve this type of construction details, construction document, construction administration level considerations when it comes to through visualization tools is really exciting for us. And I think as people start to engage these processes more, they get more comfortable with them, they're going to see a huge cost savings, both when it comes to change orders, when it comes to various items that might actually have to be picked up and fixed by the contractor in the field, but also just improving the amount of the communication between the contractor and the architect. I think this is something that has a huge opportunity. And I'm really excited to see as this 41% gets into this process, what they find, if they see the same benefits that we're already hearing from our customers. So you get this, there we go. And the other thing that we wanted to talk about, of course, and is part of where people see themselves using real-time visualization in the future, is around AI. And there's oftentimes a perception within the, or maybe internally even within the AC industry, that we're a little bit of technical laggards, that we're more traditional than perhaps is optimal. And I'd say perhaps maybe that's not the case. Maybe as an industry, we've been really waiting for the right tools to come to the fore and for us to be able to take advantage of them in ways that's actually beneficial. And in this survey, 68% of the respondents are either embracing or experimenting with AI as part of their actual visualization workflows. So this means that it's part of their process internally and or externally, visualization process. So this is pretty exciting. So you can see an example here used with Adobe Firefly and the generative fill. It looks pretty good. And so seeing this data was very interesting for us. Obviously, as a visualization software company, we want to remain competitive. So seeing that such a large percentage of the response for the survey are actually getting into AI and using as part of the workflow tells us that the time is now. And these tools are good enough to be part of the visualization workflow. So it's really something that we need to be aware of and to really help people get the most out of their workflow. So then it gets to this question of, well, what is the ideal way to combine the traditional visualization processes that we provide with AI to deliver the best outcome? And I think our Our response to this survey gave a hint at that, where 18% they really see AI assisted, AI in combination with a human being one in which it might be the best way to achieve the optimum visualization output. So if we look at what that might be in the context of a continuum, you're seeing here, what could be considered a full automation workflow, right? That Adobe Firefly image. And then you have a manual workflow, something like you might be getting out of Enscape. And then you could have an AI co-pilot assist, something that essentially takes perhaps what you've done manually, but at the same time helps you out a little bit, perhaps automatically provides background, a little bit of volumetric lighting, the atmospheric effects, improved asset distribution, and things like that. Things that perhaps make it just easier for you to achieve that high quality outcome. So people oftentimes ask me, say, well, what's your thinking about AI? Where will it go? And obviously predictions are hard, especially about the future. But that being said, something that we're starting to see gel around AI is that you have this full automation workflow. And we're seeing a huge uptick in utilization of those types of workflows, whether it be DALL-E, Midjourney, Veris, what have you. And what people are finding with this full automation workflows is that it's an extremely low cost, extremely low skill. You just got to be able to put in a prompt. And you get something of decent quality. Nothing great, but it's good. It's better than nothing. And then what we think is going to happen is that you're going to start to see a rise in what we call the AI co-pilot or AI assist type workflows. Ones in which your cost, whether it be in software and computation, will be higher than a fully automated workflow. You're still going to have some skill. Maybe the skill level won't be nearly as high as it might be with softwares now, but you're still going to have to know what you're doing to some degree. But as a result of that, in combination with that AI co-pilot, you're going to see a dramatic increase in quality. And so we think we're going to see a real bifurcation in AI-assisted workflows. And this is really how we see it likely to shake out. It's either going to be full automatic or one in which AI is there to help you achieve your design intent, your design vision. So that wraps up the webinar and the various data pieces. Obviously, we cherry picked a lot of information out of there. There's a lot more in the full report. So I highly encourage you to check out that link, access the full report. Architizer did a great job with the survey and the write-up as well. So it's all in there, and we're very excited to share it. So I think with that, I'll get out of the screen share and get into, there you go. Back into hopefully some questions that people populate into the chat, and hopefully there's some good ones.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Roderick. You did a great job of distilling some big numbers down.
I know I had to leave a lot of things out. So I really encourage people to check out the full survey. I think that there'll be information in there that'll speak to everyone individually. You just can't put it all in. But you said 45, and I think I delivered on the nose. So I did it right.
Absolutely. Great job. Thank you to everybody who has contributed questions and also comments in the chat. We've had a really lively chat today, which is awesome to see.
Oh, good.
And yeah, there's a lot of questions. If I don't get to somebody's question, don't worry, because we'll send all the questions over to Chaos after the event. And Roderick or someone on the team will be able to.
How many questions is it? You're making me nervous here, Paul.
Yeah, we're honestly, I can't actually count them. There's that many. We're probably talking between maybe 15 to 20 questions, which is awesome. So there's a few questions about Chaos and Enscape and sort of plans for the future and things. The most popular question is about how your product compares to Twinmotion. How do you see Chaos, Enscape, and V-Ray competing with programs like Twinmotion in terms of tools and use? Is there more in the works, future versions?
Absolutely. I mean, the competition never sleeps, and particularly in the context of twin motion. What I think is really good for our customers and maybe tough for us, but for those that are using Revit, I'm sure they're well aware that Twinmotion, you can get access for free if you're using Revit. And what that's forced us to do is really be aware of what our primary advantages are when it comes to our software, and what can we deliver that exceeds the benefit of free, essentially, right? That's something that's hard to compete with. And so, how do we feel we can compete with it? The big thing, first of all, within the context of Enscape, comes down to ease of use. Ease of use because of true real time. Ease of use because of direct integration with the BIM platform itself, and ease of use because of the nature of how the software is designed, and ease of use yielding to a very high quality visual outcome. So we're working very hard to make sure that Enscape stays easy to use but focused on high quality outcomes. And then in addition to that, what we're also keenly aware of is that having data sort of locked into one platform, nobody wants, particularly when you saw the results there. People have a need for quality. A big chunk of people have a need for quality. And that gets to the other place where we can compete, is that by having real time with Enscape, photoreal with V-Ray, we have other softwares. Sort of go explore the Chaos Suite. You'll see there's a lot of other softwares out there. What we are doing is providing essentially a mechanism by which, if you've created data in any one of our softwares like Enscape, that data can now be used across our entire visualization ecosystem. So you can go real time to photoreal. And we think that's one of the biggest advantages that we can provide, is that we're there at every step of your visualization workflow, delivering the types of tools that you want. I think it's important to note that these processes, like I said before, we're rolling them out as we develop them, that we are highly responsive to customer feedback. So maybe not just vote with your wallet, but communicate with us proactively. If you have needs and say, hey, this is really something that your software would be perfect for our workflow, let's do this. And that you see that Chaos collaboration. That put in the link there. People can try the beta version as an example of that. It's like, okay, how do we make ourselves competitive? Well, we make ourselves competitive by fundamentally having an easier to use, better software. And so that's our effort to do that, and really to maintain that ease of use across this full ecosystem, whether it be real-time, photoreal, collaboration, analysis, what have you. So there's definitely some stuff afoot. I think people might have saw a few Easter eggs where I didn't explicitly call out new products that we're generating. But we are aware the competition never sleeps, and it's pretty heady these days. So it's a good question.
It's awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to commend your team for your kind of transparency and communication, I think, with the community. Obviously, this webinar is a great example.
Yeah, and sharing this data, right? I mean, shoot, everyone gets to see this data, including our competitors, but hopefully we're able to interpret it and act on it better than they can.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's another reason why it's so great to have so many questions, because I think connecting the users and the people behind the scenes, you guys making the software, the more collaborative it is between those two, the better. So that's
it's easy to forget that we're all people at the end of the day, right? Behind the software, there's a team that really is trying to do the best they can. And obviously, we're not going to think of everything. And that's where communicating with customers is so important, because they always bring things to mind that you hadn't considered.
Absolutely. Jim Cowan asks, again, it's another, what's coming next for Enscape. He asked about animated characters and seasons. I think you mentioned AXYZ. I don't know if there's animated characters.
Yeah, so Axis has a software called Anima that really is fantastic when it comes to animating people. What they do is they have a mechanism for creating essentially looping people doing a particular activity, and very high quality image capture. And then it comes along with, say, with their Anima software. The answer is yes. And next year, that's what I'll tell you. So if you're talking about, the other thing to note too, though, is that we're very cognizant that to try to take Enscape outside of where its functionality is optimized for real time, you start to lose performance. So solutions that we want to provide and we are going to provide will be ones that allow for the optimization of performance in line with the application of, or the visualization intent. So, Enscape's real-time visualization directly integrated into your design platform. That may not be the best place for animated assets. Maybe another place is going to appear. That's all I'm saying.
You guys never stop.
Yeah,
That's great.
I wish, right?
Yeah, Jim also asked about support for Quest 2. I had to remind myself for a second. Quest 2 is that Oculus? Is that VR? Yeah. So yeah, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about VR and how the hardware and the software, how you're kind of working on integrating those.
So there's a couple of different aspects of it. One of them is, first of all, we did an independent survey on VR usage, and then we also track the click tracking of VR usage. It was interesting hearing this 40% use VR in this survey. Obviously, it covers a lot of different platforms, and looking at the click tracking data for VR, and VR gets used a lot, which is surprising. It's not a huge amount, but we're talking tens of thousands on a practically daily basis, but it's still not that much relative to the overall user base. But what's interesting is it's extremely high value workflows. It's workflows where you're in front of a client where it better work and it better be seamless. So that's something that we're aware of. One of the challenges that we found is that when you start to stream to a headset, or you're running a headset without necessarily having it, say, streaming directly from a computer, you start to have some challenges when it comes to the sheer volume of data that you're trying to compute with a headset. I mean, it's a small computer, fundamentally speaking. It's just not a lot of hardware in there. So you can't do the real-time visualization in the headset itself. There's a couple of different strategies we've pursued to resolve this. One of them gets into a software that perhaps isn't functioning in quite the same real-time or sitting on top of the CAD platform functionality that Enscape is. 2024, maybe there'll be something. But the other way to look at it is ways in which you can also tether your headset right now if you want, but people really like the wireless. They like the freedom of it. We've had some people that have used Cloud XR to stream to their headset, and for so essentially web streaming or cloud rendering, web streaming. What we found, however, is there's always some hiccups and there's deployment challenges. So we've actually been talking with a company called InnoActive. And InnoActive, that's two N's, INNOACTIV, out of Germany. They do something really nifty. What they do is they spin up servers around the world. So wherever you are, they'll essentially spin up a Cloud XR server there, and you've already uploaded content to that, whether it be an Enscape executable or what have you. And then someone can stream that to their device over the web. And it works incredibly well. And so it's something that we've been having some of our key clients and things like that, where it's like they ask us about this, and can I get a web-enabled VR experience? And so we set them up with InnoActive as a trial account. And something I can see a lot of thumbs up. The more people give that a go, that we hear it works, the tighter a partnership can be, the better we can make a solution out of something like that, because we know that's a real need that people have. So we're always looking at, and you're not always going to develop that technology in-house. And I have to say, when InnoActive's done spinning up these servers around the world, so where you're in Atlanta, you get a server spun up in Atlanta with your instance, like that's really great. And I don't see us being able to do that anytime soon.
Super. Yeah, any which way to make it work, right? It's
well, I'm not just any which way. I mean, this isn't like building a kid's tree fort with popsicle sticks and bubble gum. These people really know what they're doing. It's a very nice piece of software.
Yeah, I just love the culture of combining tech and working with parties that you may never have.
There's a real compulsion to roll your own, as they say. But boy, you've got to fight that sometimes, because it's really true. Other people do some fantastic work in partnering. 1 + 1 can equal more than 2, for sure, with the right partner.
That's a great takeaway quote, I think. That's awesome. Yeah, so we have 5 minutes. This is a really big question and probably needs a whole nother webinar, but I'll throw it at you anyway, just to get your initial thoughts. Ethan asked a question a lot of people have been asking, I would say, in recent times, which is, will AI replace the need for visualizers in the future?
I really think that co-pilot mechanism is the way it's going to go. And I think that for a couple of reasons. Part of it is that as AI is training you get an AI training set, and then the AI training set at some point starts using other AI generated data for the training set, and it starts to almost become like the SARS children, like it's a little recessive genetically, if you will. And so what I think that you need to really do, if you are a true designer, which I think a lot of people on this call are, and what we want to deliver to our clients, is that you need to have AI be that co-pilot. It's helping you create something from your mind, maybe seeing it from a new perspective, but it's really taking your germ of creativity and improving the way in which you can communicate that information. And we really think that's the way that AI is going to go. There is the sort of the spontaneity and perhaps errors and experience that goes into what a great designer produces it's just unmatched. You think about a client meeting someone might have where you hear, like you said, you heard like a really nice quote, or you saw perhaps a collection of toys or something that their kid had. All of this will go into your thinking about how to produce a design. And that's really what makes great design fantastic, is taking in all these disparate information sources, synthesizing them in a way that's truly unique to that designer, and then putting out that visual outcome. And I don't think we can ever replace that type of beneficial spontaneity. But what we can do is, once it gets down to that visual communication step, we can make it easier for you to go from what's in your mind to what you want to present to other people. So I really see that. And I also really see AI becoming much bigger when it comes to certain aspects of delivering components of the building that are, frankly, a little challenging from a sort of mental perspective. I mean, it's, very basic structural layouts, very basic floor plan layouts that can then be modified and adapted and things like that, or taking, say, a LiDAR scan and then converting that directly to a Revit file in a way that's actually accurate and maybe really reflects the materials and things like that. Those types of workflows we see AI being big in. But when it comes down to the true creativity, that's not where we want to go. We want to keep humans in the loop, and we want to make AI a tool to them, rather the people sort of a tool to the AI, if you will.
Absolutely. It's a subject that I've been thinking about a lot recently as well. And somebody just posted something this morning which said, you can use AI to create great architecture, and you can also use it to create mediocre architecture. And that sounds familiar. Sounds like every previous iteration of technology that we've seen. Creative humans are still going to be.
But I really hope that it raises the bar for everyone, right? I mean, that's the ideal, is it makes a great architect even better, and it makes an architect that's struggling perhaps to communicate their vision successfully, it makes them a better architect, and one that's more effective. Because at the end of the day, there really shouldn't be a monopoly on good architecture and experiencing good architecture. I mean, that's one of the great things. I was thinking of the gold medal winner from AIA this year, and she was talking about how she always liked working on public spaces, because it was a way in which just regular people got to encounter great architecture and great design. And so I think the idea of using AI to lift all boats would really be my ideal. I'd like to have an opportunity there, because there's a lot of buildings where you go in them, it's a little soul sucking. And it'd be great if AI could find a way to make them a little better.
Absolutely. Well, personally, I'm glad that people like you are thinking about this and are in a position where you can actually put some of those ideas into action, Roderick. So I appreciate that, and really looking forward to seeing what comes next. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today, for the amazing engagement in the chat, and the questions. The questions that we didn't get to, we'll definitely send them on to the Chaos team, and they'll be able to reply to you. And I'm just going to post the white paper one more time so that you guys can check out the full data. And yeah, until next time, Roderick, really looking forward to seeing what comes next, as I say.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to, honestly, the next survey. I think this was such a great idea. We could do it in a little bit and see how it compares, how the industry's evolved.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. See you again next time.
Take care, everyone.